Have you ever been scrolling Instagram or reading a founder story and thought, oh, she's so lucky? I'm Alicia Mafadia, and I want to welcome you to She Got Lucky, where luck is just the beginning. After building 3 global brands, creating next level wealth through my social media, and being announced as Instagram's first Reels Pro, I know that there's a lot more than luck to getting started, and that with the right strategy, mindset, and drive, almost anyone can create a business that feels too good to be true or too fun to be considered work. In this podcast, we explore the stories of women who've made their mark, not just by chance, but through trust, resilience, and a belief in their capabilities. We'll dive into the actual strategies, stories, and secrets of success. So, if you're ready to chase your dreams, and instead of wondering how she did it, make it happen for yourself, tune in and let's redefine what it means to be lucky in the world of business.
All right. Jera, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This is an absolute moment that I will remember forever.
Oh my goodness, I love it. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me on.
This is going to be a really, really awesome episode because honestly, Jera, you're a wealth of just unique perspective. Like I could say knowledge, you got a wealth of knowledge, but it's a unique perspective. So before we dive into things today, this is a She Got Lucky podcast, and I always like to start with our guests, the stories of where you have built an incredible amount of, you've built a community, you've built so much success as other people would see it, as I'm sure you'd be like, yes, success. But when somebody has literally brought that success down to, oh, well, you got lucky. Oh, well, it was just this.
Funny. Okay. So my mind instantly goes to the beginning. And when I say beginning, I feel like it's truly the first day of like the rest of my life. So allow me to set the scene. I originally went to college and I was a fine art major with an emphasis in graphic design. So after college, that's what I did. I was a graphic designer. I worked at an advertising agency. I did some freelance work. I worked at a fashion startup. I did a whole lot of different things. Now, if we fast forward to kind of, let's say 2012, 2013, 2014, I found myself in a really kind of not so great time. Like I look back on this time period, it was kind of dark. I was struggling with social anxiety. I went to the mirror at a WeWork where I went into work every single day and like parted my hair, just like fixing my hair in the mirror in the bathroom, had a bald spot on my head from hair falling out because I was so stressed and manipulated by this one job that I was at. And I didn't really have friends. I was just not in a great space. So I had been following a woman who you might be familiar with, Kayla Itsinas. Does that ring a bell?
Done her programs, Bikini Body Challenge.
Exactly, the BBG guide. And this was like, BBG was exploding in popularity, but it was still like very young in, compared to where like Kayla Itsinas is now in the current day in 2024. But I'd been following her for about a year, kind of like secretly. I didn't tell anyone about it. I had this different account. And I'd always wanted to be like the women she posted. Like, it just seemed like they had so much positivity and they, were working out and looking good and feeling good. So one day, and this is the day that I mentioned just a few moments ago, April 4th, 2015, I decided to download this guide and go to the gym and work out. And in addition to starting this BBG, Bikini Body Guide, which is like such an awful name, I'm glad it's different now. I also started an Instagram account. It was Workout Bean at the time, to hold myself accountable as I was starting this journey, because that's what I saw all these other women doing. When I tell you that things snowballed, and this is where the She Got Lucky comes into play, because what happened in the span of a few months, I look back on it now and I'm like, wait, what? That was me? Like that happened to me? So what happened was, at the time, no one used, the word influencer didn't exist. People weren't talking about that. Brand deals weren't happening. Like, this was early Instagram days. And out of nowhere, in the first few weeks, I gained like a couple thousand followers. Now, a couple thousand followers in the present day is a lot. If we're talking about 2015, this was like mind-boggling. And it just started growing. I think it got to like 30,000 followers fairly quickly. And what was awesome about it was that I found this outlet of creative expression through my content. I was working out. That felt really good. Got some endorphins going on. And at a time when I was really lacking friends and community, I felt like I was making friends. Like there were gals that I was talking to every single day because we were doing the same program in the same week in the same day. Now, that was insane what was happening, just growing on Instagram and those connections. But what happened was like brands started to notice, like at the very end of 2015, early 2016, I became an Adidas ambassador.
I saw that. Oh, I've seen that in your journey, in your content.
Yes. And was like on these incredible, like, I mean, I don't even know how I was about to say like multi-million-dollar shoots. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't that expensive, but it looks like that fancy to me, like being in these different like social media campaigns and commercials. And they had me leading events and tapping into my community and like bringing, different workouts and travel. And it was just unbelievable. And at the time, I also became a SoulCycle instructor, which was like a whole other huge part of my journey. But I look at this time and, sometimes like I do think I'm like, wow, was I just lucky? But I also know what I put into it. But I do think the stars really aligned with the timing because right when I started BBG, it was popular enough that people knew about it, but it was still on this huge upswing. So I was kind of like the second round of BBG gals because I got known for that at the time. And it was also at this like very beginning point where fitness, at least kind of in like New York and California, was like turned into this huge thing. Like 2015 to 2018 fitness was a whole other level. And I was at the start of that. And so I see this like really perfect timing, just kind of aligning with how things started to snowball in such a actually beautiful and really a way that I'm so grateful for if I look back on it now. So that's at least one of my She Got Lucky stories.
And I think I think with especially like I love Emily in Paris. I do. I love it. But if you are somebody who has a business on social media and you're sitting there watching as Emily in Paris is like posts a photo with her baguette or her chocolate croissant and it's like, ooh, 10,000 followers. And that's what it makes me think of in a sense, because from the outside, people would be seeing, oh, you're posting your journey with BBG. Oh, you're posting this, whatever, and you've gained all these followers. And, it is things like Emily in Paris that really skew people's understanding of how much work and consideration and, time goes into building a social community these days. But how, because this is a bit of a side jump, but like, how do you feel about Emily in Paris and her ability to gain so many followers from a photo in Paris?
Honestly, love that show. Huge fan. Like, I also just love France. And like, to me, like, it's just a total caricature of everything. It's like a caricature of social media. It's a caricature of marketing. It's a caricature of France and like Paris as well. So I think it's just kind of fun. Like I like watching it and just kind of laughing at it, knowing how wrong it is. I'm like, let's come up with a hashtag strategy. Like baby girl, hashtag strategies aren't a thing, like yes. At least anymore. So to me, it almost feels like I'm in on like the inside joke. So I take it in a really lighthearted way and love the show. But to your point, in reality, of course, it's not that easy. And I think a lot of people who aren't in the world of social media either don't understand or they simply don't care to understand. They're sort of flippant about it because they have their certain impressions of it. But on the inside, it's a lot of work. It really is.
Yeah. And I think, to your credit as well, I think we really do underestimate the power of, timing. People have there's this phrase like being in the right place at right time. And I really think that with your story especially, it's like, someone could come along and be like, oh, well, you got lucky with the timing. And it's like anyone who, you know, in quotation marks, got lucky with the timing, they took action on something when a lot of people could have sat there and let the opportunity pass. So any of these times when somebody got lucky with the timing, it's like the timing wouldn't have actually happened if they hadn't have gone up and done something, which you did.
Yeah, it's so true. I was actually recently, that made me think of how I was going through my followers recently, and I had this big goal in 2024 to like remove spam followers and bots, because, you know, I've been on Instagram since 2015. There's got to be some bot spam and also people who are just inactive as well.
Yeah.
And it was funny, as I was removing people, I'd come across accounts that their last post was in 2015, you know, week 1, day 5 of BBG. Now, that's not to say that they didn't go continue it on their own. Maybe they just lost interest in posting on social media. But to your point, like, yeah, right place and right time, but that action is such a huge component. And side note, it also made me think of how there can be such a lead up to that right place and right time and that action taking. To be honest, this is always a part of the story that I don't share just because, you know, we get on to other things, but to share it and sort of provide some extra layers and nuance to this, the whole reason I started a BBG account was because I had my art account prior. So I really got into the world of hand lettering for about a year or two. My account actually still exists. It's I think it's Bean, Bean. I always have the Bean element _Robin, because that's a nickname my mom had for me, Bean Robin. And you can see all my hand lettering still is there. And I started this account when I was in the depths of kind of the darkness of that previous chapter I mentioned. And what I found was, even though I didn't like explode with the following, it was always really small, I found community in the hand lettering community. And there were people that I collaborated with. I remember collaborating with an artist like in the Philippines, and like I drew something and she drew something and we like combined it together and like we both shared it. And that was such a huge factor for, like, that was really comforting and something I really looked forward to at the time, both the hand lettering and the community aspect I found on Instagram. And so I had this taste of what it was like to have an Instagram account and be connected to a specific community. And I don't think if I didn't have that hand lettering account and I didn't have that experience with the people I was connected to, I don't know if I would have felt pushed or pulled rather to create my BBG account. So all these factors, like, yes, right place, right time, but what are also the leading moments and experiences that lead up to the right place, right time as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so with that journey that you have had, has there been a moment where you've had somebody in your life? And I'm not sort of talking about, you know, the TikTok comment section. Like, there's always going to be people in there. But have you ever had anybody, you know, somewhat close to you who has actually put their own issues onto you in the sense of like, oh, yeah, well, you know, you got lucky with this, or, you know, that wouldn't have happened if, you know, and sort of, and really just like taken your success down?
You know, I'm really fortunate that I don't think it's ever happened with anyone close. My parents have always been so supportive. My husband's been supportive. Like, so many of my friends, because remember, I started in that time period when like I felt like I didn't really have many friends. So many of my friends in the current day, like, are in the social media space in some shape or form. So I feel really fortunate that specifically hasn't happened from someone close. That being said, like, I don't even remember the specifics of it now, but if we fast forward a few years, because, you know, 2015, I'm in that influencer fitness space. 2018, I left the fitness world, pursued more of being a lifestyle influencer. And then it was at the end of 2019 that I made a huge pivot that brings us to where I am today, into the world of social media coaching and education. And I remember fairly early on getting a DM from an account that clearly they just made so that they couldn't be identified, like 0 followers, but it was so specific towards me that I knew it was someone who followed me. It wasn't just like a complete rando. I think it was so mean that like I don't remember it now, but it was something to the effect of like, I'm like a scammer, and how dare I now sell this coaching program to other people when like I was an influencer? Like, who am I to do this? You don't know anything. So that's what really comes up when you ask that question, is more of the seemingly strangers who have an opinion. And I'm sure that's not the only person who thought that, but maybe the only person who voiced it.
Yeah.
But there's always going to be people out there, close or strangers, who don't believe in you, have something to say, don't agree with what you're doing. That's what happens when you put yourself out there and create a business, create content, really work towards your goals. There's always going to be that little crowd who has something to say about it.
Yeah. And that's why, this conversation, I love getting started with this, because despite all the things we're about to go through, it's like to go back and share your own story, share your own take, because the amount of different stories of She Got Lucky I've heard, and I'm like, I feel like everyone's got theirs. So let's bring it forward. Let's share it. And then let's dive into, it's not luck. This is what it actually is. So let's dive into, because, I've seen a big shift. I've been following you for, I reckon, a few years now, and I've seen a really big shift. And you, in my eyes, obviously I was impressed that I followed in the first place, but where you're at now, I really feel like you are just in your flow, right? The way that you are, I'm full of compliments today. No,
I know. I'll take it. I love when you compliment.
So, it really is like, so I want to talk about how have you got to a place? I know you've had a tough few years as well. You've had a really tough period. So how have you found your zone of just like, I'm here, I'm showing up, I'm loving what I'm doing. You're in your zone of creativity now, and it's just shining.
Oh, well, thank you. That is so nice for you to say. I really appreciate that a lot. And it certainly has been a journey. I think that flow, I think that zone of creativity, it comes from a couple of things, and it's not just me. I think this applies to everyone. I think it comes from experience. I mean, I've been doing the social media thing since 2015. So now, I think it's 9 years in April. Oh my God. I don't think I've ever said that out loud. Like, that's, whoa.
Next year's 10 years.
Like,
what are we doing? World tour? Are we doing a world tour?
I mean, it might be time. Yeah. So I've been in the world of social media. So almost 9 years in terms of the account that I have, and showing up very consistently over the last, almost 9 years. And then in terms of my social media coaching business, that started at the end of 2019. And so when I think of like the 7 cohorts of the group coaching program I ran for 3 years, when I think of the one-on-one clients, when I think of like over the last 2 years, the countless presentations and keynotes and workshops, you really start to hone in on what lights you up. You start to hone in on your own frameworks, on your own point of view. You start to see what you share and how that resonates with other people, whether it does, whether it doesn't. So it's really a mix of that experience, but experiment as well, because that kind of leads into the next point of experimenting with what you share and how you share it. I love this idea of messy action, where you just take action, and it's okay if you're a beginner, if it's okay if you don't have it completely figured out. But I think the more that you do and the more you take action, specifically messy action, the more you might fumble through things a little bit, but the more you're going to sharpen your point of view and your voice. So I think it's a combination of, I guess, experience and experiment. That was like a good little slip there, because it works.
Your mind was telling you one thing, but your body was telling you another.
yeah, exactly. So if I was like to approach it from a high level, that would be my analysis of it.
Yeah. So, and where did TikTok come in? Because like we know where it came in, but I mean, how have you found balancing your community on Instagram, community on TikTok, and what are some of the big sort of differences with the way that you approach them?
Yeah. So funny enough, kind of another She Got Lucky story. I feel like I have several of those.
I love it. This was meant to be.
Yeah. So to give context to that, I started my TikTok account in December 2019, which interestingly enough, it does coincide with my pivot from being a lifestyle influencer into the world of social media coaching and education. And I originally joined, and anyone can feel free to scroll back. And I was just posting random stuff. Like, I didn't understand TikTok. I didn't know what to share. It was confusing. I liked it, but I was sort of lost. And then I took a month, wasn't really posting. And then all of a sudden, I don't remember the specific moment, but I remember sharing like a posing tutorial, like how to pose for a photo. And to be honest, that's really how I started bridging the gap from my influencer position to the new world of social media coaching and education, was starting to share more behind the scenes of like how to create content, how to take photos, how to like build an Instagram post with the caption and everything from the messaging to the aesthetics. And my first few posts on TikTok where I started honing in on that were around posing and content creation. And those more tutorial type content started to take off. And I realized, like, holy cow, I have this clean slate on TikTok where people don't know me. There's no expectation. So on Instagram, where it was much more challenging, and I felt resistance, and I'm sure other people felt resistance following me with my shift in content, I didn't have that on TikTok. So I was able to explore this new side of me, this new pivot very freely. And it was the tutorials that took off. And I'll never forget the first tutorial I did on a TikTok trend. I don't know if I was the first, but I was certainly one of the first doing tutorials about TikTok trends, because we were thrown into this world of video content and there's no formal training on how to create videos. Like, we're not inherent editors. Like, it's just not this skill that we all have. And I have a past with editing, because that's one of the things that my mom does. So I've been editing since I was like a small child. Another kind of got lucky thing, like I just had the editing skills, and short form video exploded out of nowhere. But then we get to quarantine, when of course TikTok absolutely exploded. And I had already had that runway of a couple months where I had a couple tens of thousands of followers already. And so that year I exploded, like right before the 1 year mark. I think 5 days before my 1 year mark, I hit 1 million, which is like mind boggling.
Yeah.
But I look at that, runway of like me being on it before things got super big, and me finding what I wanted to post about before TikTok got super big. That was really the catalyst. Now, if we fast forward to current day, what you asked the second part of the question, how do I approach my content? I would say that TikTok, I'm really focusing for the most part on TikTok. Whereas Instagram, it's more of a mix of, yes, I'm focusing on social media, strategy, mindset, how to show up authentically, how to create content, all of that, while also really incorporating a lot of me as well. So I almost feel that Instagram is more of my personal brand as a whole, whereas TikTok is very narrowly focused on TikTok and very heavily focused on tutorials as well.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, you are so spot on. It's really the case of where there is no formal training. And look, even now that there probably is, I'm sure there's TikTok like university or whatever, right? There was no formal training, and it is people like yourself, like myself, with video marketing, with, editing experience, with this background, where we're able to come in and give these unique perspectives of, based on what I've done with editing and production and things like that, this is how I see it. And I think that that's one of the best things about finding people who aren't just learning from others that are doing the things, like, but instead they're bringing in their own unique perspectives and unique experiences on different ways, which I absolutely love. So
Yes.
it's the best. And I think that, you know, I really love how you've just approached that in the sense of TikTok, very narrow, Instagram, this is where it is. And let's sort of take a little leap into the world of speaking, because
Yeah,
you
let's
are
do it.
absolutely like I'm like, when's your next gig in Australia? Like when are you coming on over?
I would love any. Do you know my husband's Australian? So like maybe it will happen. You never know.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's from Perth.
Oh my gosh. Well, then that's just a sign, I reckon. Let's put that out in the universe.
I know. Putting it out.
So, you know, somebody like yourself who you mentioned at one point you had social anxiety and you've come a long way since then, but now you are really focusing your business on speaking, workshops, and that is, I know for so many, including myself, that is like, that's a dream. That's something that really lights us up. So I'd love to know a little bit of how you got into that, and we can dive in, because I know you've got another She Got Lucky story.
Yeah, I know. I was just about to say, I'm like, is this the podcast like for me, like the be all end all? Because I can just like very much.
We got 5 episodes. I reckon like let's break this into 5 episodes here. The speaking She Got Lucky.
I know.
The TikTok She Got Lucky.
Yes. Yeah. Oh my gosh. It is so interesting to, you know, hindsight's always 2020 with how things come to life. But I mean, it's another one. So let's get into it. And what's interesting is that this has its origins in my SoulCycle days. So as I mentioned, in my fitness days, I was an Adidas ambassador. I became a SoulCycle instructor, which is a form of spinning, if someone isn't familiar with that. And I ended up leaving SoulCycle in mid 2018, which really marks the end of like my fitness days overall. Now we fast forward a couple of years. TikTok, we already talked about me starting that. And at the very beginning of 2020 was when I first launched the very first cohort of my original group coaching program, the Social Media Saloon, which is in a temporary retirement at the moment. But we also get to quarantine as well. So interestingly enough, like TikTok got super popular because we're all stuck at home. At the same time, 2020 was a massive year for courses and programs and group coaching. So like a little mini She Got Lucky, like here I am, I launched my first group coaching program in February 2020. And then all of a sudden everyone's home and everyone wants to be in programs and learning and tapping into community that way, in addition to learning. And so with that happening with my own group coaching program, I was sharing it a lot, as I do with so many things on Instagram. Like anything that I do, for the most part, I'm sharing it unless it's like super personal. And so I was very open, like, okay, we're doing this call this week and we're talking about this. And so little like words start to spread, like, oh, Jera's teaching, Jera's presenting, Jera's coaching. And I started to get invited to do a lot of guest coaching in other people's programs. I started to do virtual conferences. By the way, all of this, like the amount of free stuff that I did, like basically like it was a year and a half of just speaking for free for the most part. But every time I guest coach, I posted about that. So I was always doubling down on the stuff I was doing. Okay, so with that foundation set, we fast forward to the end of 2020, and I get a text message from my friend Austin, who was a SoulCycle instructor at the same time as me. And he goes, Jera, so-and-so wants to talk to you about doing TikTok trainings at Estee Lauder. Now, I remember this person, but you have a ton of people who come to ride with you at SoulCycle, and you don't know what their professions are, and you don't need to ask them. It doesn't matter. So I had no idea that he's super high up at TikTok. Like, I forget his title right now, but like, I don't know, the head of marketing for like all of Estee Lauder, something like that. And so I have a chat with him, and he puts me in touch with his team, and they're like, yeah, can you come teach a 90-minute TikTok session virtually to hundreds of our global ambassadors? And so that call happened. These calls, I mean, they're amazing, but these calls are intense. Like we have about 300, 500 people on the call. And there's also live translators translating what I'm saying into all of the different languages of all of their different ambassadors. I think there were like 8 languages that it was being translated into. And so that really opened up the door for me in so many ways. But before I get into that, I just want to acknowledge like how wild that I had this connection from just someone who took my class at SoulCycle, happened to follow me, happened to continue following me, happened to see that I was having success on TikTok and also teaching social media to my cohorts, and then goes, oh yeah, we'll bring Jera in to teach TikTok to the freaking global ambassadors of Estee Lauder. Yeah. So to me, like that is one of the pivotal moments for me that opened up so many doors, because one, it really did open up doors because I have continued to work with Estee Lauder over the years in a lot of different ways, teaching TikTok and short form video. Estee Lauder is like the parent company of like Bobbi Brown, MAC Cosmetics. So I've been introduced to both of those brands, and I've worked a lot with both of those brands. And then because I'm working with these larger brands, and of course, posting about it because that's what I do, other people take notice. So another huge door that opened for me was someone who worked at a company while I was a fitness influencer again. They were like on a shoot that I did for Adidas, I think. And then they worked at, I think, L'Oreal at this point. They made a total shift and they're like, hey, can you come and talk to L'Oreal and our creators about social media? So it's just this like snowball effect that happens, but that kind of gives context into the initial start of it and that really big pivotal moment with Estee Lauder that was so defining for me.
Yeah. And, you know, I think as well, it's just a little reminder is that people are afraid to make mistakes. And your journey is literally like you might go to the left and then you realize, oh, actually I want to go to the right. But what you've just said, you know, that time at SoulCycle, that could have been maybe seen as your left, right? You went to the left, you went to SoulCycle. And the seeds you plant by just continuing to, you know, just ride with the journey, you're planting seeds, even if you are taking messy action and you're going to the left, you're going to the right, you're trying to figure out your course, you're planting seeds, and you never know in those moments where something might end up coming back later on. I think that is so incredibly brilliant. I love it.
Yes. It's such a good point that you make. You just never know what's going to happen from a past chapter, even if it's completely unrelated. You never know what will happen from a random one-off connection that you meet at an event or at a coffee shop. Or, I mean, even people that I've met on Instagram. Like this girl just popped up on Threads, by the way, loving Threads. And I just loved her threads. And turns out she's a copywriter, and like, I just hired her because she popped up on Threads. Like, obviously slightly different, but you just never know what's going to happen from like a brief interaction or even a chapter that is like a complete like left, as we're calling it at the moment. So it's once again, hindsight is 2020, but it just shows what is possible in the present and in the future. You just never know.
Yeah. And, you know, to your point there, you never know, like when there are new platforms that come out, Threads, Clubhouse, you know, at some point TikTok,
what a time.
Right? Yeah. And I remember quite a few people were like, oh, is this just going to be another one of those apps that comes and goes? And look, it was, but because, you know, on reflection, I got in there. I was like in there.
Same.
The amount of connections built in that time, like, you know, did you perhaps build up a bit of a following there and now it's not being used? Maybe. But in that time, did you build any connections that these days you would perhaps have even forgot that started there? It's
honestly, yes. And you know what's incredible? I have a group of, it's 4 of us, and we have a text thread, like just normal, you know, messaging. And we talk almost every day, if not multiple times a week. And the reason we have that text thread is because I actually know one of them I didn't meet on Threads. And I think the other 2, maybe I did meet on Threads. Oh, sorry, on Clubhouse. I'm getting my apps confused now. Clubhouse. But we were all super active on Clubhouse, and like, all are in the social media kind of coaching, speaking, content creator space. And that was in, was Clubhouse, was it 2020 or is it 2021? Something around there.
I reckon.
I think 2021.
Yeah, 2021.
Yeah. And like, these are three gals that I probably talk to more than anyone else. And like, we're really close friends now. We always, if we have partnerships or like speaking contracts or rates that we need to run by each other, or if we just need to vent or need advice about life, it's not just business, but I hadn't thought about that in so long. So what you just said brought that up of these three gals. I have this connection to them because of Clubhouse, and now like we're really great friends. So it is pretty amazing how it all interconnects and weaves together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really do think like from this, it's just a little reminder, if you're listening and if there is a new app, a new thing that pops up, it's like, yes, you could be like, oh, will this end up wasting my time because it's not a real thing or whatever? Like, I'll just see, or just dive in there. It is absolutely, ever since Reels came out and I was just like, ooh, like my video skills are going to get a workout here. Let's give this a go, right? It's like, you don't know, but the potential, the what ifs, like do it for the what ifs, do it for the plot twists, do it for the connections, the lessons. Like I love it. And this is really, as we said before, it's those decisions to just take the opportunity and run with it that then look at you now, these connections, these little seeds, you've got didn't have that group of friends when you back then, now you've got this awesome group and it just comes along the way.
I'm right there with you, retweeting all of that.
I love. So let's talk through anyone who's listening and wants to sort of come into this world of speaking a little bit more, right? How would you naturally, you did have that really brilliant connection. And once you've built that awesome social proof, that's very helpful. But in the same sense, you did the hard work with the, free gigs, free masterclasses, virtual things, building up that skills. Because even if you have an awesome opportunity come at your front door and say, we want you to speak in front of X amount of people, you may not be ready to deliver and speak and, everything like that. So talk through, if somebody's listening and they're like, right, I'm a coach, I have clients, I have group programs, I've got courses, I speak on social media, but I don't know how to widen my impact in the world of events. So what would you sort of give them? What would you say to them as let's steer this direction?
Yeah. So first things first, and you kind of set the scene, but I do want to make something really clear, is that I feel like you have to brand yourself and show up as a speaker, brand yourself as a speaker and show up as a speaker before you are a speaker. So I think one of the best ways to do that is starting with your social media. So for example, let's say someone is interested in Jane as a potential speaker, but then they go to Jane's Instagram account and every single video is a trend. Every single video is just an audio with text on screen. To me, you're not showing up as a speaker. I think the power of your voice in your content, definitely talking to camera, I would think that's especially important if you're wanting to speak, but even voiceover can be powerful as well. That has to have a presence on your Instagram feed. I think also just things as simple as including speaker in your bio for SEO and discoverability. Like sometimes we really just have to show up as our future self, even if you haven't officially had a gig. So that's one thing. I also think it is really important to just practice your craft. So to me, speaking can come to life in such a variety of ways. It can be talking to camera in your social media content. It can definitely be when you are on your Zooms with your coaching clients, whether it's one-on-one or whether you are in a group. And then there's things like podcasts, like we're doing now, panels, and more like speaking, but slightly lower pressure where you're guest coaching in a group program, something like that. Now, that's to me like really setting the stage and like creating this cozy bed of content where it shows off your skills and then starting to put the feelers out to hone in on those skills. One thing that like I always like to be transparent about, I don't do any pitching for speaking. Now, that's not to say that I have anything against it and that I won't do it, but I've had enough things coming in organically that I don't want to pitch myself because I don't have the time to do more. Also, I don't want to be traveling all the time. So things that aren't in Austin or aren't virtual, I'm going to pick and choose here and there because like I want to be home with my husband and my dogs. So I think that is just a testament though to the amount of essentially like promotion that I've done on my Instagram, on my TikTok as well, where I'm just like, yo, I'm a speaker. Like, look at me speaking. Look at me speaking here. Look at me speaking there. And this is what I call soft selling. And soft selling is where you are creatively featuring what you're doing or showing the value of what you're doing without necessarily hitting people over the head saying like, hire me, click here, sign up. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like every so often we need that hard sell. But to me, soft selling is kind of like, hey, just so you know, I do this. Like, hey, I'm at Social Media Marketing World, which I was a week ago. Here's a clip of me on stage. I don't have a link to book. I'm not saying sign up now or inquire. I certainly could. Once again, nothing wrong with that. But the more that you can really soft sell via your content, anytime you're doing any sort of speaking will, I think, have a really profound effect. So that's more of my experience with kind of getting gigs because I'm not pitching myself. I do think though that someone could absolutely put the feelers out and research local events in their area. I think that's a great place to start. Hire a videographer when you do those so you can get the content.
Yes.
Use that on your channel and then really once again continue to soft sell. You'll have more experience, more confidence when you are potentially pitching yourself for larger things. And there are so many things happening from local things and workshops and events to there's, conferences happening every single day, at least in the US, like all across the country. So I think pitching yourself could be a wonderful thing if someone wants to put themselves out there in order to start getting more speaking gigs.
Yeah, and can we just come back to that point of hiring a videographer? I only had someone tell me that they hired their own videographer for quite a while, and I was like, oh, like the amount of events I've been at, I'm like, that was such a good talk. Like I can't wait. And then the SIM card got lost. We had planned to have a videographer, but something fell through. So now we've just got the iPhone. We can't give you like. Honestly, that is such a brilliant point. Like everything you said was really good, but I was just like, we have to really address this. Is like not only at the beginning when you're building that experience and you're potentially giving your time, your value, the speaking, for free, but also investing in building that portfolio, building that because not only are you using it for a show reel, not only are you using it for, whatever pitching, but you're also using it for your social media. And that is a big thing that I've noticed, Jera, is like really something that it came up maybe a month ago. I had a girl who I ran into her in Bali and she's like, oh my gosh, I've been following you for so long. And I was like, this is like what a moment. Anyway, she hadn't taken my course, any of my courses, but she had learned so much. And she's like, I have to thank you so much. I just watched the way you did things and I learned. And my point of bringing this up is because that's what I am like. I'm able to look at, people like yourself who I'm like, I would love to do, this is something I want to sort of, focus on. And I'm like, you can learn just by watching the way people show up. I'm not saying copy. I'm not saying go onto Jera's profile and be like, okay, Jera's posting this, so I have to post this. It's like, look deeper and you can literally learn so much from just the approach, the way you're doing things. You putting up a reel and it's, you're speaking on stage and it might not have your voice, but it might have a different audio, right? Yeah, cool reel, maybe inspirational. But what's happening underneath is Jera has just reminded the world, I'm a speaker look at me. Don't I look like fun? I look like I'm going to make your event the best thing ever. Like this sort of stuff. I just like, this is a skill that I want. Like there's so much value here, but I really as well just want to remind, it's like, if you're going and checking out Jera, which obviously go check her out. We'll put her details in the show notes. We'll put her arts account in the show notes as well. If you want to go look at her that time of her life. But really, it's like, go follow Jera. And if nothing else, watch what she's doing, not in a way to copy, but in a way to learn from your approach.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. It's so funny you say that, because I was just I worked with a business coach for a couple of years, 2019 to 2021 or so. And she's hosting her live 3-day event that she does every single year. And I just adore her. So I popped in and there's certain I learned messy action from her. Like that was something that was so impactful for me. But another thing that she said, and I'm pretty sure I just heard it today, is success leaves clues. And to me, that's essentially what you just said. Now, I'm not going like, yeah, like I'm successful, like, but
I just hear the TikTok audio. Yeah, I'm successful. I can't remember I can't do the accent, but that's what I'm hearing right now.
Yeah, I love taking, like, when real life reminds me of TikTok sounds. It's the best. But you're so right. Like, and this can apply to anyone. It's like, if someone is doing something you want to do, what can you pull from the way that they're showing up, how they're talking, the events that they're going to? Like maybe someone saw I was speaking at Social Media Marketing World. That's top of mind because I was just there, and they didn't even know that was an event. Now that's on their mind, and they're like, oh, well, maybe it's a goal of mine to speak at Social Media Marketing World next year. So there's so many different ways to kind of extract from someone who is a few steps ahead of you, or maybe many steps ahead of you, and see what you can kind of learn from them and apply to what you do. I think that is a great way to approach things.
I love it. I love that. Can you say that again? Clues?
Success?
Clues. It's a short quote and I've already got it wrong.
I love it. Okay, we got this. Success leaves clues.
3 words. Let's see if Alicia can get it right this time. Success leaves clues. I love that. You know when you find a quote and you're like, this lands? Like the other day I had one and it landed for me was fast success creates ego, whereas slow success creates character. And
I like that.
Me too. I freaking loved it. So I feel like this is the perfect way to end the episode. We've got 2 epic chill, like I've got the chills, right? Let's see if we can get it right. Success leaves clues.
Yeah.
Did I get that right? And
chef's kiss.
Yes, spot on. And fast success builds ego, whereas slow success builds character or creates character. And I just, and that as well just reminds me in the journey, it's like, yes, fast success is brilliant. It's exciting, but what you gain in the journey of it is so powerful to building the insanely powerful person you will become. So, Jera, thank you so much. It has been absolutely nothing short of what I had imagined it would be chatting with you. I am very, very grateful for your time. We'll have all your details below. But, if you are listening to this episode, I would love to know, what has been your favorite moment? Is it the quote? Is it, a moment or a story that Jera shared, okay? Jump on your stories, tag Jera, tag myself. I would love to know what it is, where you're listening, where this has landed. But otherwise, Jera, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on. This has been awesome. I've loved my time with you.